Metal Gear Acid is one of those weird experiments that the industry did when they're trying to port over big series to handheld consoles. So the year was 2004 and Sony was putting out their first portable console, the UMD Spinnin' PSP. Now at the time, the Metal Gear series was out there making huge waves with the recent release of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, and 3 years before with my personal favorite, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, both on the PS2. So at this point, Metal Gear Solid and Sony very much went hand in hand, so Konami had to put out a Metal Gear game for Sony's new shiny handheld. But what we got was in no way a traditional Metal Gear release. A Metal Gear Chain of Memories, Metal Gear Acid, is a card-based strategy game with Metal Gear trappings kind of wrapped around it. You know, it is kind of weird that this game and Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories released within like 2 months of each other. Both PS2 games porting over to handheld consoles, both using card-based mechanics. Whatever, who am I to judge? So stealth is still a major component, as well as overly complex storylines involving Solid Snake's history, except everything is controlled by a deck of cards. So it's an interesting concept, though not really what fans were asking for. So each round in Metal Gear Acid is turn-based, where players will use cards that have either references or just straight up previous characters from Metal Gear games and really just Kojima adjacent games as either abilities or movement. The cards are cool, and when you play one that is a famous character from a Metal Gear Solid game, you get a snippet of footage from its respective game with whatever the most exciting music that game had was. Also, when you get new card packs unlocked, you get an actual commercial for them, and it's really cute, and the guy who is announcing it, he is trying his best to excite you, and he is not doing the best of jobs, but it is still very hilarious.
New weapons, new items, will support you with a variety we're proud of. It is the MGS 1 Pack! Stun grenades to knock enemies unconscious, and a cardboard box to fool their eyes. Check out the card shop during intermission.
So the main crux of the game is the player trying to navigate through levels, avoiding detection from enemy forces, or just murdering them in cold blood for laying eyes on you, when the stealth system and game mechanics don't mesh as well as you really want them to. So the story is told through comic book style cutscenes. They're not like the ones from Portable Ops or Peace Walker. These are more of a fancy slideshow, if anything. And other than when we're looking at the plane in the game story is basically told through JRPG levels of dialogue boxes. There is no voice acting in this game, just dialogue box after dialogue box after dialogue box. So the plot involves a plane with a presidential candidate that's being held hostage by 2 creepy murderous dolls until they get something called Pythagoras. Solid Snake is then sent into a research compound after a previous failed attempt that involved the last team being wiped out by this huge bear of a guy who handles an anti-tank rifle with one hand, like it's a fucking Nerf gun or something. Then of course, in true Metal Gear style, the story gets unnecessarily convoluted real fast, and it basically just involves the bad guys just gaslighting the ever-loving shit out of Snake to make him think he's someone else. The game is non-canon to the actual Metal Gear timeline, so it's not mucking that up any more than it already is. But for where it's placed in it, it seems to take place before Metal Gear Solid 1, when Snake was sequestered away in Alaska racing dogs. Now graphically, this game does look rather bland. It is effectively a launch game for the PSP, and it does its best to try and emulate the style of its PS2 brethren, but it just comes out as a bunch of grays and browns, and all the character models look rather ugly, and I think that stems from the art style just not meshing well with it being a launch title. They didn't know how to really work the PSP to its full power at that point. Now let's get to the meat and potatoes of the game. So the moment-to-moment gameplay is kind of a mess. Each card has its own ability, like planting C4 or having guards get sliced up by ninja swords. That doesn't seem to actually bother them though. The cards can also be used for movement instead of their actual ability, if you so choose. And each card has a cost associated with it. When a card is used, it causes the cost counter by your health to go up. The amount of cost you spend on a turn decides where you fall in the turn order. So you can use some big flashy cards, then almost immediately pay for it since the AI may get to go twice before you can use your turn again, and vice versa. There are also cards that lower your cost. So if you plan it correctly, you will get to move maybe twice or even 3 times if you're lucky before the enemy can make their next move. Now this gives every action you do in a really tense situation a lot of weight. But it doesn't really work out like they want it to, I think. Most times it just hamstrings you. So like, let's look at the movement for example. The movement has a lot of problems. So when you use a card to move, you lay out your path that you want to go, and then at the end you pick which direction you want to face, and whether you're standing, crawling, or flattened up a wall if you have that option. Now the reason picking your standing position after moving sucks, because if you want to crawl under something, you have to run up to that object, select crawl, then use your remaining action to crawl up to a max of like 3 spaces, and that's your whole turn. You also can't run through doors. If there's a door, you have to run up to the very front of it, let it open, then use your next move to go through them after they're open. And you also can't see inside the doors before they're open, which is kind of fine, but the ability to not go through it and just like take that gamble really sucks. Now, it doesn't sound too complicated yet, but wait, there is more. The game has an equipment system, kind of. It shows off in the intro cutscene where the player can equip different cards as weapons or abilities like dodging. The only problem is that it's not very well explained to the player how it works. In the early game, all Snake has in terms of weapons are the SOCOM and FAMAS cards and assorted grenades and mines. So you're like, cool, this is how combat works. I select the card, he shoots the enemy, I lose the card, it goes back into the draw pile, whatever. Well, you're wrong. So after about like 4 hours, you start unlocking card packs that have equippable weapons. And all the single-use weapons become things like the Nikita and Stinger missile launchers. Now, that's fine if that's how you want to design your game, but what makes it not fine is I spent the first 4 hours of the game without those mechanics ever mattering. So how equippable items work is by selecting the card from your hand, then placing them in the equipment row in the top right corner. The game tells you that you need to load the weapon with ammo for it to fire, so obviously you think they're ammo cards. It's a card game, has to be ammo cards. No, you're stupid. From there, you just select another weapon card that uses the same ammo caliber as printed on the card. Fucking duh. So it doesn't even have to be the same weapon, which is nice, but it doesn't really tell you that. I spent 4 missions unable to use those cards because I couldn't figure out that's what it wanted. So when you equip a weapon, you can either load it immediately if you have a matching card, you can move so you don't get blasted in the middle of a fight, or you can equip another card to that card, or a different equipment slot, and just sit there with your thumb up your ass until your next turn. Also, important items like key cards have to be equipped to be used. So, one, you have to remember to put them in your deck for a mission, and they take up one of your equipment slots. And what's worse, a level 2 key card won't open a level 1 door. It just doesn't make sense. Why isn't that just inherent to my character? Why is that something I have to wait to draw to use? That's another problem too, is there will be items you need to use and you just can't. Like, I need C4 to blow down this wall. We'll have to wait for it to pop up in my deck. So it could be card 30 of 30, and I'm just sitting here discarding cards until I get it. Things like that should have been like, I walk up to the wall and I had an option to blow the wall up instead of having to hopefully draw the C4 from my deck. Also, there's another mission later on where you have to use a sniper rifle to shoot down a bunch of Cypher drones. And you have 4 available of the sniper cards. One of them has to be for loading it in to your equipment slot. And then the other 3 you cycle through to shoot down 6 drones. which means you have to cycle your deck at least twice, assuming you don't miss any of the shots. And it just causes a lot of wasted time. Like, what were they thinking right there? Like, that shouldn't have been done that way. Now, don't get me even started on the little arrows on the equipment cards. They raise or lower the hit chance of adjacent cards, or just completely get rid of the equipment, depending on the color of the arrow. And the game only explains this once in an intermission briefing, and there's not an in-game reference that tells you what all these different words and things mean. You just have to remember it from that one time you read it. And this is something the game constantly does, is teach you something during an in-mission briefing that they should have taught you way earlier. And there's no real tutorial, it's just a couple lines of text that a lot of it is abbreviated and numbers, and you don't really care, you're just wanting to get to the next mission. Nothing is taught to you in the moment-to-moment gameplay, it's all reading a manual that you get to see once and then never go back to. And that's not the only time the game fails you to teach something in a timely manner. So a normal Metal Gear game, right? You can see an enemy sightline via the radar. Well, this game doesn't really need a radar, right? Since it's top-down. So, through the beginning of the game, I was confused at why I was getting seen in situations that I thought were okay.
What was that? I don't know.
Well, it turns out, by pressing triangle, you get an overhead view, and you can drag the camera around over an enemy and see a representation of their sightline. Now, that would have been nice to know in a game about stealth before Mission 5. By the way, that's over an hour into the game. I was an hour and a half into the game before I learned how the enemy sightlines worked. Like, a good tutorial would have done this game wonders. Now, I remember getting this game as a kid and liking it a lot, actually. But looking back on it as not a 10-year-old goblin, I'm left disappointed. And I feel bad, because I really did like this game and I was excited to replay it. The game has a really neat idea, it's just its execution is so flawed. If it just taught the player better in the start of the game, or had a better action economy in it, the game could have been really good. There was a sequel that came out a year later that looks, well, a lot different. The art style is very anime action styled, and it's got very, like, highlighter acidy colors that coincide with the game's name. But I'll have to play for myself to see if it actually plays better. It looks like it does from some videos I've watched online, but I haven't tried it yet. So, to wrap it all up, this game is probably not worth your time, unless you're like me and have extreme nostalgia for it, or you're just curious. It does play very well on emulator, so there's some bonus points, I guess. So what did you think? Did you play the hell out of this back in the day, like me? Also, leave this video a like, it helps out so much. Let me know what you want me to cover next. So I've really been enjoying replaying old PSP games at the moment, so leave me some recommendations for your favorite PSP games, because I was too poor back in the day to buy them myself, so I only had like 4 over its like 8-year lifespan, and 3 of those were Metal Gear games. Catch you guys next time.